Lord, to be away from the bodies, to be with the Lord, that Paul was talking about? Was he talking about being there with the Lord with a body?
No.
No.
How do we know that?
Because you can't take it with you.
Because of the verse that we just read. It is born a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. And this is in 1 Corinthians 15. I just read to you 1 Corinthians 15, 42 and 44. But the rapture that we think of happens in 1 Corinthians 15, 52. In a moment, in the twinkling of the eye. So the context here that's spoken of in 15, 42 through 44 is contextually talking about the event of 1 Corinthians 15, 52. So therefore, prior to that event, it says that we have a natural body, but after the in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, then we're going to get a spiritual body. But prior to the time of us getting that spiritual body, we don't have a spiritual body. So the question being, if we don't have a spiritual body, how can you wear a robe? How can you have a white robe on you if you don't have a body?
Well, there are a lot of people who study this. They conclude that we have a temporary physical body.
Okay, let me say something to you. Concluding something by mere speculation is like philosophy.
I didn't say that.
Okay,
Then
what I'm saying is, okay, then you're quoting him.
No, I'm saying
give me the basis.
No, I can't.
Okay, then don't. If you can't explain it, I'm just simply.
The best I can.
Okay, I'm saying.
I don't have a complete answer.
Okay, I'm simply saying we're not talking about novices here. How long have you been a Christian? How much do you read your Bible? Okay, if there's a verse that says that people that die and go to heaven have a body prior to 1 Corinthians 15, 52, and that's something significant, we should be aware of that. And we should be able to quote a chapter and a verse rather than a spiritual philosophy. Okay, now if you got the verse, I'm willing to listen. But if you don't have the verse, I'm not. Why am I not? Is because we know that when we die, our body goes into the ground and deteriorates, and we know that this says what is sown in natural body will be raised a spiritual body. It doesn't give some kind of a limbo situation here.
Okay, what about Lazarus? What about Lazarus? Could you send Lazarus to dip his finger so he could touch my tongue? That was before they got the bodies, but they have bodies.
How is that before they got bodies?
Before the
First of all, that's a parable. First of all, that's a parable. That's not talking about necessarily an actual event.
That's in the bosom, though.
Pardon me?
That's in the bosom before the resurrection, isn't it? And it's shown that they do have bodies. When they looked across and seen Lazarus in heaven.
Yeah, but it's a parable. It's a story. It's not, what in 1 Corinthians 15, 42 through 44, we're talking about a reality. Okay, an actual event in an actual situation that's described. We don't take a parable concept and undermine an actual event.
So you don't think that happened?
Pardon me?
You don't think that happened with Lazarus and the rich man?
Do you think there were four the foolish virgins and they had oil in their, you know what I mean? Do we take a parable and make it into an actual reality situation, or are we dealing with a concept?
Jim,
Go ahead.
I watched a Bible study on television, and they said that one of the pastors explained that wasn't a parable because Lazarus had a name, and they said it was because when Jesus talked about it, they said a name. People. They named actual people, and like parables, they didn't name names or something. That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
That again
That's
is
what I've heard.
Yeah, and a lot of that
So,
hearing is not based upon facts; it's based upon speculation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't believe that to be a parable, but if you look at the story, the guy is consciously in torment. and the way the story is going, that he was asking for a drop of water to cool his tongue. I think what you're trying to establish, though, is that you cannot wear a white robe without a body. And I believe you're establishing that if you have a body and you have a white robe, then you have been raptured.
And I appreciate that very much, but are we saying that hell exists today? Or are we saying that hell exists in the future? Do we have two hells? Do we have one hell with flames and fire and heat today, and another hell with flames and fire and heat that's called the lake of fire in the future?
Well, there's nobody in hell, which is the lake of fire. There's no.
Pardon me?
The term hell is the lake of fire, and nobody's in the lake of fire at this time. There are people who are in this place that what's the word for?
There, it's Sheol, Hades.
Yeah,
It's used interchangeably with the lake of
but
fire.
that's the place where Lazarus, the story takes place, and that's the point I was making earlier. You have these temporary places until you had paradise, where the saved people who were waiting for the crucifixions, so they can be taken up to heaven. And you also had, across from this chasm, you had this Hades, where people are waiting before they get rid of the judgment and go to hell. But it's not technically hell. There are different places.
Well, the King James Version does call it hell. The modern versions do have it Hades.
I just know that there's many definitions for hell that are legitimate. Many applications for the word hell that are legitimate. I do know that. But what I'm simply saying is this. I don't base my biblical doctrine on parables. And that's just where it starts and ends with me. And I don't base my biblical doctrines on stories and philosophies and spiritualizing the Bible. I don't do that. Now, whatever those situations meant and whatever they illustrated, they cannot be in conflict with 1 Corinthians 15, 42 through 44 that I just read. It can't, whatever they represent, whatever's going on there, they cannot, because this is not a parable. This is talking about an actual event. It's stating that things are, how things are made and how things operate. It's not a philosophy. It's an actual stating facts.
Okay, how about when Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, and one of the apostles, I forgot which one, said, should I build a tabernacle for all three of you? They all had bodies.
Yeah, right.
Before the resurrection again.
Okay, now wait a second. Were they part of the church? Okay, so wait a second. Does the rapture apply to the church or to the Old Testament saints?
I'm just talking about bodies before the rapture.
Pardon me?
I was just talking about having bodies. I believe strongly believe they have everybody has bodies after they die.
I'm simply saying there's such a thing as a natural body and a spiritual body. They had spiritual bodies.
What's the definition of a spiritual body, in your opinion?
Well, a spiritual body would be a body that is able to put on a robe, a white robe.
So it's physical, but it's spiritual.
It resembles some form of a physical imagery. I mean, Jesus, when he walked through the door, and he appeared.
What is the difference between what you just said and what I said earlier that you criticized? You said, show me the verses. I said, there are people who have more study of this subject than all of us combined together. And they, at least 3 or 4 that I've seen discuss this, have agreed that we do have these temporary bodies. And you just got through saying it yourself, a spiritual body.
No, I'm saying a spiritual body in the context here is not a temporary body. This that is spoken of in 1 Corinthians 15, 42 through 45 is the body we're going to have for all eternity. That's the significance of it. You see, that's our spiritual body, our spiritual identity for all eternity. There's no indication there's ever going to be any other than what is spoken of here in 1 Corinthians 15, 42 and 44.
I think the only thing that really seems really important about this conversation is the comment Frank made that he concluded that based on what you're saying, that these people who are wearing these robes have already been resurrected because they have these resurrected bodies. That's the important thing.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Is the fact is that and we got sidetracked, but that was the whole point of what I was trying to establish here. These people that are spoken of being in heaven, are wearing robes. You can't wear a robe without a body. The Bible talks about only two kinds of bodies, one that is perishable and one that's imperishable. One is sown a natural body, one is raised a spiritual body. These people have bodies that they can put on, and they're in heaven, that they can put on the robe over. So therefore, how they get the bodies that they could put a robe over?